Hey guys, Kevin Cage back with another video update. Welcome to the channel. Like and subscribe if you're serious about the digital asset space, and let's get right into it today. One take and uncut. This is going to be a quick video update. I'm going through the basic concept of the ICE 9 lockdown, and basically this is a theory on how global markets could freeze entirely, and this is something that we should absolutely entertain. I hope it doesn't come to this, but I want to share this concept. I want to hear what your thoughts are down below as well. For the most part, I'm going to be reading through this entire article. It's, I find it to be perfectly eloquent. I'll, give my 2 cents here and there, but for the most part, guys, let me, just kind of inform anyone that's never heard about this, but I find it to be very, very fascinating. But before we get going, I just put out this tweet today and I just wanted to emphasize this. So again, the best way to usher in a new system, meaning this new global financial system that it seems would be the best time to usher in, is to destroy the current one, or at least make the current one seem very, very obsolete. All right, so I know it's pretty easy to tank an economy, guys. There's power outages. We have some of the biggest manufacturers in the world being shut down. There's no more trade as well. Trade is halted. Basic, liquidity is not moving. There's tons of repo lending. There's pandemics. There's quarantines, locking people inside. Mom and pop shops and even, small and medium enterprises are going out of business or trying to defer payments and things of that nature. Yet the governments tend to only bail out the biggest groups. All right. It is very, very obvious at this point that the economy is not going to be here, or at least it's not going any higher at this time. No matter how much debt they print, it needs debt in perpetuity to survive. So again, it's even easier when they start, they stopped global. They closed some of the trading floors too, like the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ. And once they begin to close some of these global markets, even if they close one global market or one major bank chain entirely and actually shut down, it's going to have this type of domino effect. And this is what ICE 9 is. We have lockdowns, travel bans of entire countries and states, and even banks. So ICE 9's absolutely a real thing. I hope it doesn't come to this, but just check out this theory. All right. So right here, this is by Jim or James Rickards. Highly recommend checking this out. There are also some great YouTube interviews with this gentleman, but essentially I'm going to go through this. So right here, this right here, ICE 9 is a phrase borrowed from this author right here, and he wrote a book in the early 1960s called Cat's Cradle, and this is a doomsday scenario. So in Cat's Cradle, a doomsday machine is created, and these scientists actually discovered a molecule called ICE 9, and it's very similar to water, H2O, but there's two differences. Number one, it has a melting point at 114 degrees, which means it's frozen at room temperature. This other characteristic is that if a molecule of ICE 9 comes into contact with a molecule of water, the water turns to ICE 9. In other words, it turns to a form of ice immediately. So the plot of this book was that there's only a small amount of this ICE 9, and the scientist gave it to his 3 children in vials. And as long as the vials were sealed, it was all good. But if you open the vial and pour the ICE 9 into a stream, the stream would freeze. Then the stream's connected to something, obviously. Then the lake would freeze, then the river would freeze, and eventually, of course, that leads to all water, and that's the ocean. The ocean would freeze, therefore the entire planet would freeze eventually from this one drop, from basically freezing liquidity at one point. Now, this has to do absolutely with the digital asset XRP, which is literally coined on-demand liquidity. So if one market closes, whether it's, a commodities exchange, a derivatives market, a bank, a financial institution, especially a bank that's too big to fail, anything like that, or a government shutdown or reset or any kind of weird scenario, 2020 has been a wild ride so far, guys. I think it's already crazier than 2008. Obviously, I was a lot younger then, but just seeing some of the parallels, it's crazy in orders of magnitudes, wilder, crazier. So essentially, when liquidity freezes, or now new liquidity cannot enter that market, and that liquidity, water, it has to find a source. So that liquidity is going to be forced to go somewhere else. And eventually it has this catastrophic type of domino effect. So essentially, they're saying that one hedge to this is, of course, gold and silver. Physical markets that don't really, rely on this, but we will see. So right here, he has a book called Road to Ruin as well. I've actually kind of scanned through it a few times as well. And basically, he believes physical gold and physical silver are the answer to ICE 9. So again, if you are paying someone to, hold your silver and gold and you have a paper note, you do not own that asset unless it is in your hands. So right here, I don't think that these metals are in jeopardy in an ICE 9 scenario. Gold and silver are one of the ways to survive ICE 9. So in the crisis 1998, I was very involved in negotiating a solution prior to the crisis of 1988, where we saw Wall Street get together and bail out the hedge fund long-term capital management. In 2008, central banks got together and bailed out Wall Street. And the next crisis, 2018, maybe sooner, and now we're here, 2020, who's going to bail out these central banks? Are we really going to rely on the Fed and these groups? Essentially, the whole system needs debt for money. Without debt, there is no money. It's not backed by gold anymore. It's complete fairy dust. So each bailout gets bigger than the one before. Each crisis gets bigger than the one before. It's the snowball effect. We are now at the point where the ability of central banks to reliquify the system is in doubt because they're heavily stretched. Notice there's that same type of meaning, liquidity. That is basically the cause of all global market crashes or recessions. We need liquidity. This is why I'm a big believer, not necessarily in central bank digital currencies and going a little more cashless. We're still going to have fiat. We're still going to exchange for the most part with, US dollar, euro, things of that nature, but they need on-demand liquidity and interoperability between these assets, right? So central banks, we know they've printed trillions. It's not obvious that they can't do it again from the current levels without destroying confidence in the dollar. We know the dollar can be suffering, granted with the fluctuations, but now here's the answer. So where will the liquidity come from in this next financial crisis if it can't come from the banks? The answer, the IMF. We talk about them a lot of people do. The International Monetary Fund has the only clean balance sheet out of the major financial institutions. It can print money. They call it the SDR. This is the special drawing rights. And Jim calls it, I call it New World Money. Now we know IMF, BIS, Bank of International Settlements, these groups are tightly included with Ripple. The answer is, when all of this is said and done, guys, I believe that people are going to be so surprised how they missed it because they're looking at the current price and not realizing how quickly things can be moving, especially during times of such economic and geopolitical turmoil. The IMF can flood the market in the world with trillions of SDRs, and I imagine it being an ESDR, electronic version. And I don't really care if XRP is a part of that or not. What I'm saying is I believe XRP will be transferring high value over the XRP ledger in the future, hopefully interoperating between central banks. So equivalent to more than trillions of dollars. We already saw that article. The IMF already, brought billions upon, at least 1 trillion into the market now, right? One of the lenders of last resort. So there's a problem with this model at the IMF though. It's got a 24-member executive committee representing 24 nations around the world, or groups of nations. Every 5 years, they change the voting rights. So you guys can read a little bit about this. I essentially find this to be really, really fascinating. The whole ICE 9 explanation, talking about Ben Bernanke again, the chairman, formerly of the Federal Reserve, and he led through that crisis with the central banks, guys. Now remember, Ben Bernanke was literally at Ripple's event talking about Ripple and their solution and distributed ledger technology and blockchain infrastructure, saying yes, it serves a real purpose for cross-border efficiency, for getting rid of that that layer of trust. And something I want to emphasize, and I saw XNeo on Twitter talk about it. He says this with every crisis as well. Our whole financial system is ultimately based on trust. Now, blockchain, for example, was truly invented to solve the trust issue. So in a time of financial crisis, trust begins to fall and then enters one of the solutions to solve trust. And of course, operational efficiency, scalability, cheaper costs, security. There's just so many benefits, and the answer is right in front of us. So again, the metaphor of ICE 9 is what spreads it from molecule to molecule or institution to institution, requiring a freeze on the entire system. It happened in part in 1914, 1931, 1933, and to gold in 1971. There's no precedent for a total freeze, but we're getting closer to that point. And it's really interesting if this were to happen. Notice in the news, we are getting word of internet becoming, over capacity because of all these people working from home and, the type of throughput and bandwidth required to operate. It kind of seems silly. I don't know if there's another narrative behind the scenes, but you can absolutely show statistics to support those claims all over the news. So I'm not going to be entirely cynical with that. But again, if now were a time for a complete freeze, it could be pretty wild to see banks or global markets shut down for, a few days or a week. It's wild to even entertain the thought. All right, and right here, this is all him saying this, I would not have more than the insured amount, which is in the US, $250,000. Sitting, he's recommending pulling your money out of the bank. Or he says, I don't recommend running down and pulling all your money out of the bank. I would not have more than the $250K. You can spread it between your selected banks so that each is backed and insured up to the limit. All right, and that is something that Cryptopolis talks about as well in this wealth management course that I'm actually looking to get. But right here, that's ICE9. In the world described, the dollar price of gold will approach the $10,000 level, if not much higher. People are very bullish. Now, during recovery, people believe whether it's a gold standard or just recovery, that gold will play a role. I believe that too. I mean, if a gold standard was announced, get ready for, gold to skyrocket per ounce anywhere from, $5K to I've seen figures as high as $25,000. Pretty wild to think. And you can assume the same thing for silver, at least in, multiples that grow. The ratio between gold and silver has never been higher before as well. So with silver, a lot more volatile. So expect bigger gains when gold goes up as well. So right here, ICE9 is a freeze of the financial system. It's something that's happened before. All right. So this is not just some unknown thing. It does have this, catastrophic effect. No, maybe not a 100% freeze, but it affects other markets. All global markets are, they all affect each other. It's a global economy. It's one single ecosystem. It is an organism. The economy, corporate health, banking, you name it. All right. So it'll happen again in the next crisis. It already is. Look at what is happening. Some trading floors are stopping entirely. Some banks, I've seen, thousands of branches closing entirely. There are some mini bank runs occurring, but there is a push for going cashless, maybe not 100%, but a push to show the benefits of a digital system. Physical gold and silver, in his opinion, is the answer. Get it while you can. Guys, remember, there is a shortage in gold. Where was it? Let me finish up with this point. I saw it. Let's see here. Right here. So Rose sharing this. Sorry, there's no more gold. Many top European dealers have no gold. And look who it is. Jim Rickards as well. From the front lines of gold, Royal Canadian Mint closed for 2 weeks. U.S. Mint backordered a month in advance. Brings JFK on half shifts, Gold cannot move. Same thing with a lot of silver dealers, whether it's, JM Bullion. What is that other one? Atmax? I'm blanking on it. I've been reading way too much. But all metals are being backordered. And I know, the same thing goes for some, supplies and, ammunition for many people in America, things of that nature. But you have to pay attention to what is happening. Why are these metals so low and so suppressed? Well, I'm going to say the M word. It is manipulation. And I think you guys know the group behind it, at least one of the biggest silver holders in the world. I'm just going to say JP. All right. So with that, guys, I am just completely out of breath right now. Hopefully you understand this. I'm going to link this in the video description if you want to look at this. He has additional books and YouTube videos as well. Just something to entertain. I'm not going to say it's going to happen 100%, but it absolutely, will happen to some degree, just like we've seen in previous years, because we are in an absolute crisis. Some people are finally just saying we are in a recession. False. We've been in a recession. With that, guys, hit the like button, share this video around, and I will see you in the next one.